Welcome back to Chrono Tales, where the shadows hold secrets and the forgotten refuse to stay buried. I'm your host, and tonight's tale will make you think twice about what lurks beneath your feet. This is the story of Whispers from the Basement. What I'm about to tell you happened in the autumn of 1994. In the small college town of Ravenshollow, Maine. The Blackwood family had just moved into their dream home, a Victorian mansion with a history as dark as its weathered exterior. Sometimes the past doesn't stay buried, especially when it's calling your name. Professor Michael Blackwood had always been drawn to old houses. As a history professor at Ravenshollow University, he appreciated the stories that aged walls could tell. When he found the Victorian mansion on Elm Street for sale at a price too good to refuse, he convinced his wife Elena and their 12-year-old daughter Sophie that it was fate. Elena Blackwood was a practical woman, a pediatric nurse who believed in science over superstition. But as she stood in the foyer of their new home that first October evening, she felt something she couldn't explain, a heaviness in the air, as if the house itself was holding its breath.
Michael, are you sure about this place? It feels, watched.
It's just old, honey. These Victorian houses have character. Give it time.
"12-year-old Sophie had no such reservations. She raced through the house, claiming the tower room as her bedroom and exploring every nook and cranny with the fearless curiosity of youth. It was Sophie who first found the basement door.
Mom, Dad, there's a door behind the kitchen pantry.
The door was painted the same white as the pantry walls, camouflaged so well it was nearly invisible. The handle was old brass, worn smooth by countless hands. When Michael turned it, the door opened with a groan that seemed to come from the house's very bones.
It's just the basement access. Probably sealed off for insulation.
The stairs descended into darkness, old wooden steps that sagged with age. Michael flicked the light switch, but nothing happened. The basement waited in shadow, patient as a grave.
We'll deal with it tomorrow. I want to get Sophie's room set up before bedtime.
But that night, as the Blackwood family slept in their new home, Sophie heard something that would change everything. At exactly 3:17 a.m., she woke to the sound of whispering. At first, she thought it was her parents talking downstairs. But as she listened more carefully, the voices seemed to be coming from beneath her room, from the basement.
Mom, Dad.
Sophie slipped out of bed and crept to her bedroom floor, pressing her ear against the cold hardwood. The whispering was clearer now, multiple voices, all speaking at once but too quiet to make out words. They sounded urgent. Sophie tiptoed downstairs to the kitchen, drawn by a curiosity stronger than her fear. The basement door stood slightly ajar, though she was certain her father had closed it completely. Cool air drifted up from the darkness below, carrying with it the scent of earth and something else something sweet and cloying, like flowers left too long in water. Sophie pushed the door open wider and peered down the stairs. The darkness was absolute, but the whispering was louder now. She could almost make out words, almost understand what they were trying to tell her.
Sophie! Sophie! Come down. We've been waiting.
Sophie ran back to her room and hid under her covers, heart pounding. But the whispering continued until dawn, a constant murmur that seemed to seep through the floorboards and into her dreams. The next morning, Sophie told her parents about the voices. Elena immediately checked the basement door. It was closed and latched, just as Michael had left it.
Sweetheart, old houses make lots of sounds. Pipes settling, wood expanding and contracting. It probably just sounded like voices.
But they knew my name. Mom, they were calling for me.
Sophie, your imagination is wonderful for creative writing, but we need to separate fact from fiction. I'll check the basement today and make sure everything's secure.
After Sophie left for school and Elena departed for her shift at the hospital, Michael descended into the basement with a flashlight and a healthy dose of skepticism. What he found there challenged everything he thought he knew about their new home. The basement was larger than expected, with stone walls that spoke of the house's 1880s construction. But it wasn't empty. Along the far wall stood 7 small wooden crosses, each carved with a name and date. Children's names. Children's graves.
Emma Catherine Morrison, age 8, 1923. Thomas William Hayes, age 6, 1924. Sarah Jane Bennett, age 10, 1925.
Michael counted them twice. 7 crosses, 7 children, all who had died between 1923 and 1929, all in this house. But that wasn't the most disturbing discovery. Scattered around the crosses were dozens of children's drawings, as fresh as if they'd been made yesterday. Crayon pictures of families, houses, pets, and flowers, each one signed with a child's careful handwriting, each signature matching a name on the crosses. Michael gathered the drawings with trembling hands. The paper should have been yellowed and brittle after 70 years, but it was pristine. The crayon colors were bright and vibrant, and at the bottom of the pile, he found a drawing that made his blood freeze. It was a picture of a man leading children down basement stairs. The man was drawn in dark colors: black suit, black hat, black eyes. The children were drawn in bright colors, but their faces showed fear. At the bottom, in a child's handwriting, the bad man takes us downstairs. Michael raced upstairs and immediately called the Ravenshollow Historical Society. What he learned made him wish he'd never opened that basement door.
The Morrison house? Oh my, you've bought the Morrison house. I'm so sorry.
What do you mean?
Professor Blackwood, that house has quite a history. Between 1923 and 1929, 7 children died there under mysterious circumstances. They were all students at the Morrison Academy, a private school that operated out of the house.
What happened to them?
The official cause was always listed as accidents or sudden illness. But there were rumors, whispers about the headmaster, Jeremiah Morrison. Some said he was conducting strange experiments. Others claimed he was involved in occult practices. When the 7th child died, the townspeople had had enough.
What did they do?
They burned down the school wing of the house with Morrison inside. He never made it out. The house has been sold and abandoned 17 times since then. No family has ever stayed longer than 6 months.
That afternoon, when Sophie came home from school, she found her father waiting in the kitchen with a serious expression.
Sophie, we need to talk about the basement.
Did you hear them too, Dad?
No, sweetheart. But I found some things down there that explain why you might be hearing voices. This house has a very sad history.
Michael told Sophie about the 7 children, about Jeremiah Morrison, about the school that had operated in their house. He showed her the drawings, watching as her face grew pale.
Dad, these look like they were just made.
I know, honey. I can't explain that part.
The voices last night. They were trying to warn me about something. They kept saying, "Don't let him find you."
That night, Michael and Elena took turns staying awake, listening for the voices Sophie had described. At exactly 3:17 a.m., they heard them too. The whispers were different when heard through adult ears. Where Sophie heard warnings and pleas for help, Michael and Elena heard something else entirely, a conversation across time, children's voices trying to communicate something urgent.
Can you make out what they're saying?
Something about hiding and someone coming back?
He knows she's here. He's looking for her.
Hide, Sophie. Don't let him take her to the room.
Elena gripped Michael's arm as the meaning became clear. These weren't random hauntings. The children were trying to protect Sophie from something. But from what? Michael approached the basement door with a flashlight, Elena close behind. The door stood open again, despite being securely latched before bedtime. Cold air flowed up from below, and with it came a new sound, footsteps on stone, pacing back and forth.
Michael, those aren't children's footsteps.
As they listened, a new voice joined the whispers. Deeper, adult, with an authority that made the children's voices shrink to frightened murmurs.
Where is she? Where is the new child? I can smell her fear. It's been so long since I've had a proper student.
No, leave her alone.
She's not for you.
You cannot protect her forever, little ones. She will come to me just as you all did. She will learn what you learned in my special room.
Michael slammed the basement door shut and threw the latch. but they could still hear Jeremiah Morrison's laughter seeping through the wood.
Locks cannot hold back the dead, Professor Blackwood, and I have such wonderful lessons to teach your daughter.
Michael and Elena raced to Sophie's room, but her bed was empty. The window stood open, curtains billowing in the night breeze.
Sophie! Sophie, where are you?
She was here when we checked an hour ago.
They searched every room, every closet, every possible hiding place. Sophie was nowhere to be found. But from the basement came the sound of a child crying and a man's voice, patient and terrible, speaking in low, soothing tones.
There, child. Don't cry. We're going to have such fun together. I have so many things to show you, so many experiments to try. You're going to help me complete my work.
We have to call the police.
And tell them what? That our daughter has been kidnapped by a dead man.
But even as Elena dialed 911, they heard Sophie's voice from the basement, not crying now, but speaking with a strength that surprised them both.
You can't make me do anything. The other children told me about you, about what you did to them.
The other children are weak, girl. They failed my tests. But you have potential. You can see us, hear us clearly. You have the gift I've been seeking.
911, what's your emergency? Ma'am, please calm down. You're saying your daughter is in the basement with an intruder?
Yes, no, I mean, it's complicated.
How do you explain to a 911 operator that your daughter has been taken by the ghost of a man who died in 1929? How do you make them understand that the supernatural can reach across decades to claim new victims? Michael couldn't wait for help that might never understand the situation. He grabbed a crowbar from his toolbox and headed for the basement door. But as he reached for the latch, the door swung open on its own. The basement was no longer the stone-walled storage room he'd explored that morning. Now it stretched impossibly far, with corridors branching off in directions that shouldn't exist. Gaslight flickered from sconces on the walls, casting dancing shadows that moved independent of their flames. Michael descended the stairs into what was now the Morrison Academy of 1925, somehow existing in the same space as his 2024 basement. He could hear Sophie's voice coming from somewhere deep in the maze of corridors.
I won't let you hurt me like you hurt them.
Hurt them? My dear child, I was educating them, teaching them about the boundaries between life and death, about the power that comes from crossing those boundaries.
As Michael moved deeper into the academy, he began to see them, the 7 children from the crosses, no longer whispers but full manifestations. Emma Catherine Morrison, age 8, Thomas William Hayes, age 6, Sarah Jane Bennett, age 10, and 4 others, all moving through the corridors with purpose.
She's in a special room. We have to help her before he finishes the ceremony. We tried to warn her, tried to keep her away. But he was too strong.
Not anymore. There are 7 of us now, and we remember everything. We remember what he did.
Michael followed the children through corridors lined with classroom doors, Through the windows, he could see ghostly lessons in progress, spectral students at desks, taking notes that would never be read, learning subjects that had no place in any normal curriculum. At the end of the longest corridor stood a heavy oak door marked Private, Headmaster's Laboratory. From beyond it came Sophie's voice, no longer defiant but growing weak.
Please, I want to go home. I want my parents.
Your parents cannot help you now, child. You are mine as these 7 were mine. But unlike them, you will not fail. You will help me achieve true immortality.
Michael burst through the door into a chamber that defied explanation. It was part classroom, part laboratory, part ritual space. Ancient symbols covered the walls, and in the center stood an altar made of black stone. Sophie was bound to the altar with ropes that seemed to be made of shadow itself. Jeremiah Morrison stood over her, no longer the incorporeal voice from the basement, but a fully manifested figure in a black academic robe. His face was gaunt and pale, his eyes burning with an unholy light.
Professor Blackwood, how good of you to join us. You can witness your daughter's transformation from ordinary child to something far more extraordinary.
Let her go, Morrison. Your quarrel is with the townspeople who killed you, not with innocent children.
Innocent? Children are never innocent, Professor. They are vessels waiting to be filled, minds waiting to be molded. These 7 taught me much about the process, about the precise moment when life becomes death, becomes something greater.
But as Morrison raised what looked like an antique surgical knife, the 7 children appeared around the altar. They were no longer the frightened victims they had been in life. Death had given them strength, and time had given them purpose.
No more Jeremiah Morrison. Your lessons end tonight.
The children joined hands around the altar, their voices rising in something that was part song, part prayer, part spell. The laboratory began to shake, ancient symbols flaking off the walls, gaslight flames flickering wildly.
You cannot stop me. I am your teacher. I am your master.
You were never our teacher. You were our murderer. You stole our lives for your experiments.
But we learned from you, Morrison. We learned how to cross the boundaries between life and death.
The shadow ropes binding Sophie dissolved as the children's power grew. She rolled off the altar and ran to her father's arms. But the confrontation was far from over. Jeremiah Morrison raised his hands, and the laboratory filled with a darkness that seemed to have weight and substance. But the 7 children stood firm, their combined will creating a barrier of light around Sophie and Michael.
I gave you eternal life. I gave you purpose beyond the grave.
You gave us eternal torment, but we learned to find our own purpose.
The standoff might have continued forever, but Elena's voice suddenly echoed through the laboratory from impossible directions.
Sophie, Michael, the police are here. The fire department is here.
The sound of the living world pierced through Morrison's constructed reality. Like sunlight through fog, the laboratory began to fade, the academy corridors becoming transparent, the gaslight dimming.
No, I will not return to the darkness. I will not be forgotten.
You won't be forgotten, Morrison. We'll make sure of that.
Every family that moves into this house will know what you did.
As the academy dissolved around them, Michael and Sophie found themselves back in the ordinary basement of their Victorian house. The 7 crosses still stood against the far wall, but now they were joined by an 8th, a rough wooden marker with Jeremiah Morrison's name carved in angry letters. The children appeared one final time, no longer the terrified victims Morrison had made them, but protectors who had found peace and purpose.
The house is safe now, Sophie. We'll make sure he never hurts another child.
What about you? Will you finally be able to rest?
We'll rest when we're ready. For now, we have work to do.
Other houses, other children who need protection. Morrison wasn't the only monster who used his position to hurt the innocent.
Michael and Sophie climbed the basement stairs to find Elena, waiting with 2 police officers and a fire captain. The adults were confused by reports of voices and strange sounds that had suddenly stopped.
Ma'am, we've searched the house. There's no sign of an intruder. The basement door was locked from the outside.
But we heard voices, footsteps.
Old houses settle strangely, especially Victorian houses with complex architecture. Sounds can carry in unexpected ways.
The authorities left, filing their report as a false alarm, caused by an old house and stressed new homeowners. But that night, the Blackwood family sat together in the living room, processing what they had experienced.
The question is, do we stay or do we go?
I won't let fear drive us from our home, especially not when we have guardians.
They won't hurt us, Mom. The children, I mean. They're protecting the house now.
Over the following weeks, the Blackwood family settled into their new home with an unusual sense of peace. The children no longer whispered warnings at 3:17 a.m. Instead, they whispered lullabies, protecting Sophie's dreams and ensuring the house remained safe. Six months later, the Blackwood family had not only remained in their Victorian home, they had thrived. Michael's research into the Morrison Academy had resulted in a published paper that helped historians understand the dark period in education when some teachers used their authority to harm rather than help. Elena had started a support group for families, dealing with unexplained phenomena, helping them distinguish between genuine, supernatural encounters and the normal sounds of old houses. Her practical approach and medical background made her uniquely qualified to help others process their experiences. And Sophie had become something of a local legend among her classmates, the girl who lived in the haunted house and wasn't afraid. She never told them the complete truth, but she did share what she'd learned about facing fear with courage and finding allies in unexpected places. The 7 guardian children still watched over the house, though their presence was gentler now. Sometimes Sophie would find new drawings in the basement, pictures of the family, of the house surrounded by protective light, of children playing safely in sunny gardens. But perhaps most importantly, they had helped other children in other houses, other families facing monsters both supernatural and all too human. The network of protective spirits grew, connected by their shared purpose of keeping the innocent safe. One evening, as autumn returned to Ravenshollow and the anniversary of their first encounter approached, Sophie sat in the basement with her homework, no longer afraid of the space below ground. Emma appeared beside her, translucent but smiling.
Are you happy here, Sophie?
Yes, it feels like home now. Like we all belong here together.
We do, and whenever you need us, we'll be here.
What about when I grow up? When I move away?
The house will always be protected, and you'll always be connected to us no matter where you go. Some bonds transcend life and death.
That night, for the first time in months, Sophie heard the whispers again. But now they weren't warnings or cries for help. They were stories. The 7 children shared tales of their lives before Morrison, their dreams and hopes, their families and friends. They were no longer defined by how they died, but by how they chose to use their eternal existence. And in houses across New England, other children sleeping in other bedrooms heard different whispers, protective voices warning of danger, offering comfort in the night, ensuring that the mistakes of the past would not be repeated in the present. The Blackwood family learned that some hauntings aren't about fear. They're about love. Love strong enough to transcend death, to protect the innocent, to turn victims into guardians, and a house of horrors into a sanctuary. And so concludes tonight's tale from Chrono Tales. Remember, not all whispers in the dark are threats. Sometimes they're the voices of those who care enough to keep watch, to stand guard, to ensure that children sleep safely in their beds. The next time you hear unexplained sounds in your home, listen carefully. It might just be your guardians, making sure you're safe through the night. Thank you for joining me in the shadows. Until next time, sleep well. Someone is watching over you.